Should we start, ma'am? No, you have to unmute. No, you have to unmute. No, no. Please unmute your mic, ma'am. Yeah, now.
Am I audible to everyone now?
Yeah.
IJME BAJSS Arts and Commerce College for Women, Ranebennur, Haveri District, Karnataka. IQAC Initiative and Department of English organized a national level webinar on trends in Indian writing in English fiction today. Good morning, everyone. With the blessings of His Holiness, Dr. Sri Shivamurthy Muruga Sharanaru, the President and Patron of IJM Vidya, we would like to start the national level webinar now. IJMV BAJSS Arts and Commerce College for Women, Ranebennuru, Haveri District, Karnataka, with the initiative of IQAC from the Department of English, we are organizing the national level webinar on trends in Indian writing in English fiction through Google Meet and YouTube live streaming. Our college was established in the year 1979. Since then, it has been imparting education to rural women and empowering them to be good citizens. Our college is affiliated to Karnataka State Akka Women's University, Vijayapura. This is our first endeavor in organizing the national level webinar from the Department of English. Due to the effect of COVID-19, throughout the world, the webinars are organized in all walks of life, including educational institutions. As we have noticed that the readers of literature are losing interest day by day, there is a considerable response to short stories and fiction. The popular literature is gaining importance. The new trends in Indian writing in English, particularly fiction, have paved the way to look into the social and political issues dealt with by the writers of today. The vibrant fictional world, which was unraveled by the trio Mulkraj Anand, R.K. Narayan, and Raja Rao, with their Indianness in their works, has been continued by the new writers of fiction in the 21st century through all their spectrum of subject matter and narrative style. That's what we are going to discuss in this webinar today. We have Professor N.S. Gundur, Chairman, Department of English Studies, Davanagere University, Davanagere, Karnataka, as the keynote speaker. We have two resource persons, one from Bihar and another from Chhattisgarh. The renowned Professor Arunima Sinha Madam, Head of the Department of English, Lalit Narayan Mithila University, Darbhanga, Bihar, will speak on gender issues in fiction. Professor G.A. Ghanshyam Sir, in charge officer, State Level Quality Assurance Cell, Directorate of Higher Education, Raipur, Chhattisgarh, will speak on the topic Blend the Trend to Mend the Minds. Now I request our Principal Dr. G. Vijay Kumar Sir to welcome all the guests.
Good morning to all. It's my great privilege to welcome all the great personalities and participants to this national level webinar organized by Department of English with the initiative of Internal Quality Assurance Cell of our college. At the outset, I express my gratitude and pranam to our Reverend President of SJM Vidyapita Chitradurga, Dr. Sri Shivamurthy Muruga Sharanaru. And I remember the incessant support of Honorable Secretary Sri A.J. Paramashivaya and Honorable CEO Sri M.G. Duraswamy for this webinar. I wholeheartedly welcome Dr. N.S. Gundu, Professor and Chairman, Department of English Studies, Davangere University, Davangere, Karnataka. I welcome you, sir. It is my great pleasure to welcome Professor Arunima Sinha, Madam, HOD of English, Lalit Narayan Nichila University, Darbhanga, Bihar. I welcome my dear friend, Dr. G. A. Ghanshyam, Professor and in charge officer, state level Internal Quality Assurance Cell, Directorate of Higher Education, Raipur, Chhattisgarh. I welcome you, Ghanshyam. I also welcome our dear participants and my dear teaching and non-teaching colleagues of our college, my research scholars, students, and all to this national level webinar organized by the Department of English with the initiative of Internal Quality Assurance Cell, SJME, DAJSS, Arts and Commerce College for Women, Ranebennur, Haveri District, Karnataka. Once again, I welcome you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. N.
Thank you very much, sir, for welcoming the guests. Now, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. N.S. Gundu, sir, Professor and Chairman, Department of English Studies, Davangere University, Davangere, Karnataka. Dr. N.S. Gundu, Professor and Chairman, Department of English Studies, Davangere University, a meritorious scholar from the beginning of his UG and PG studies, has secured PhD from Karnataka University, Dharwad, for his thesis, Partition Novels in Indian Writing in English. He has served in various capacities in government colleges in Karnataka, Maharashtra, and in National Defence Academy, Pune. He has completed UGC-sponsored research project on English for military purposes. He has authored 2 books with ISBN publication, 4 publications in Canada, and 26 articles in both international and national journals. As a research supervisor, he has been guiding 7 scholars. 3 scholars have been awarded with PhD degree from Tumkur University. He has attended, organized 38 workshops and conferences. He was also a visiting professor in Delhi University in 2018. He is also active member of Modern Language Association, USA. I request Professor N.S. Gundur, sir, to deliver the keynote address. Over to Dr. N.S. Gundu, sir, from Davanagere.
Thank you, madam. Muruga Sharanarana Nense. Am I audible to you? Hello. Before I forget, I would like to thank Arts and Commerce College for Women, Ranebenuru, Principal Vijay Kumar, Rupa, G.V. Kori, Maltes Gadad, Professor Arunima, Professor Ganesham, and good to see some of my friends from Dharwad and my students from Davangere University. What I would like to do is, I am not going to talk about Indian English fiction, the major themes and techniques. I am going to put forward a different reconceptualizing of the field of Indian writing in English. Before I proceed, I would like to begin with a distinction. The distinction is like this. There is a practice of Indian writing in English. Novelists, poets, dramatists, writing in English in India. That is what I call the practice of Indian writing in English. I am not going to talk about how this practice is being done, what are the major themes in this practice. Instead, I am going to talk about the constitution of the field. The point I am trying to make is that I am not going to talk about the practice of Indian writing in English. Instead, I am going to talk about how that practice is studied. I mean, how Indian writing in English as a discipline, as an area of study, as a domain of inquiry has evolved. I don't know whether this point is clear to you. Once again, I emphasize that I am not going to talk about the practice of poetry, the practice of plays, the practice of fiction writing. I'm not going to talk about the themes, major themes in Indian writing in English. Instead, I am going to focus on how the study of the practice has evolved. That is the constitution of Indian writing in English as a discipline. So, and how to understand Indian writing as a domain of inquiry. History of this domain. You see, Indian writing in English had just got not more than, okay. So how did we constitute the domain of inquiry in Indian writing in English as a domain of inquiry? We cannot think of the emergence of Indian writing in English without English studies discipline. The domain took its birth due to English studies as a discipline. For example, look at the nomenclature we have since the beginning. In the beginning, it was called Indo-Anglian literature, then Indian writing in English, Indian literature in English, Indian English literature, etc., etc. There is a lot of debate about which nomenclature is useful and which is not useful. I'm not going into the details of it. The point I'm trying to make is that the birth of this domain as a domain of inquiry, as a discipline, is intimately connected with the life of English studies in India. You cannot think of Indian writing in English without the discipline of English studies. So, there is a connection between English studies, Department of English, institutionalization of English studies, and the birth and development of Indian writing in English. If we look at the pioneering work, it is mostly done by the English scholars or professors of English under the rubric of Indo-Anglian literature. Then we have the studies which take the nature of literary histories. The first among K.R. Srinivas Iyengar, who gave a series of lectures abroad and brought out a book on Indian writing in English. Later, we have M.K. Nayak's History of Indian English Literature, then so many history of English literature. So this domain was constituted as an area of inquiry mainly through the historiography, writing of history of Indian writing in English. Then we have individual authors. For example, I might be excluding so many authors, so many texts, because I'm just given 15 minutes. Within 15 minutes, I have to wind up. That's why I will take a few major names and major texts and leave out the rest of them. So after literary history, what we have is the study of individual authors. Professor C.D. Narasimhaya was heading the series called in the Arnold Heinemann, the monographs on R.K. Narayan, Raja Rao, Mulk Rajanand, Manohar Margaonkar were brought out. They were exclusively the studies of Indian writers in English. The famous J.S. Amoor's Manohar Margaonkar's monograph is very important. Like that, the most important work comes by Meenakshi Mukherjee on something called Twice Born Fiction, which is very important. Like that, basically this domain was shaped by the historiographical work of K.S. Srinivas Iyengar, M.K. Nayak, Arun Mehrotra, etc. And then individual authors, then genre studies like fiction, plays, poetry, etc. This is the trajectory of Indian writing in English as a field of study. So if you look at the host of, I think in English department nowadays we come across more number of studies on Indian writing in English than other fields. And basically, if you look at them, basically they deal with themes and techniques. Either it is poetry or novels. We don't find the institute. So basically, in this area, we find literary histories, individual authors, monographs like Arnold Heinemann, then themes and techniques. So as against this kind of practice, I want to reconceptualize this domain differently. Instead of looking at it as literature, we have to look at Indian writing in English as a literary culture. This is very important. Let me repeat it. We have to reconceptualize Indian writing in English not as literature but as literary culture. I take this notion of literary culture from Sheldon Pollock's Literary Cultures in History, Reconstructions from South Asia, which includes essays on Sanskrit literary culture, Persian literary culture. Even there is a very famous and useful essay by Vinay Darwadkar, Formation of Indian English Literature. This is a very good essay. Unfortunately, it is not prescribed in English departments, and I request students and scholars to please take a note of this essay. Then there are literary cultures like Tamil literary culture, Kannada literary culture, Bengali literary culture, Gujarati, Pali, etc., etc. This is an important approach. Instead of looking at literature as a brute fact, it is important culture. So again, I will talk about this Vinay Darwadkar's very important essay, Formation of Indian English Literature, which talks about how Indian English literature evolved historically. What are the social conditions, political projects, the lives of writers that shaped and made this domain of inquiry. So, literary culture does not look at literature simply as a series of texts. Literary culture looks at the historical formation of the practices, how text came into being, how writers wrote, uh, textual practices, reading public. For example, when we study Indian writing in English, do we really care to understand the reading public? Who are the readers of Indian writing in English? Apart from our MA papers, we don't care about to know what is the reading public, what is the nature of reading public of Indian writing in English, how texts are produced, how texts are consumed. So even we don't have life narratives of writers. For example, look at the dominant way of doing research in Indian writing in English. We select few novels, few texts, and then we do a thematic study. It is not going to help us. For example, how about writing the making of R.K. Narayan as a fiction writer? So far, we don't have any research made on the poetics of R.K. Narayan or other novelists, their way of writing fiction, the poetics of their fiction. We don't have an authoritative biographical sketch of these writers. So, like this, literary culture in Indian writing in English has to take into account print culture also, socio-political project and the formation of the field, etc. So, if that is the case, the Indian writing in English has a different place altogether in the history of South Asian literature. For example, if you compare Indian writing in English with vernacular literature like Kannada, Bengali, Marathi, etc., it emerges as a cosmopolitan literary culture, not as a vernacular literary culture. It belongs to the tradition, not the tradition. It is like what once Sanskrit was, what once Persian was. So we have to approach this literary culture as a cosmopolitan literary culture rather than one among Indian literary cultures, because that helps us to study it in relation to vernacular culture. I will give only one example how to study Indian writing in English as a cosmopolitan literary culture in relation to vernacular culture like Kannada. Let us take the example of R.K. Narayan. Have we ever attempted to study Narayan as a literary figure who was shaped by Mysore literary culture? Look at a very interesting insights can be drawn if we study R.K. Narayan, the making of the novelist in him in relation to Kuvempu. That is going to be very useful study. Both novelists, both writers stayed in Mysore, and they shared the same milieu. Look at the vision of these two writers who were taking, whose making was taking place very much in Mysore. So it is important to study Indian writing in English in relation to vernacular literature. Otherwise, it becomes an island. This is only one example to suggest. So there are many bigger problems one has to take into account when one deals with Indian writing in English. I will just wind up by simply recounting the major problems one can deal with when one engages oneself in research into Indian writing in English. There is a problem of tradition. Is there a tradition of writing in Indian writing in English the way there is a tradition in Kannada or English literature or American literature? It's a very big problem, and one has to spend at least 10 years to deal with this problem. Then there is a problem of translation. Just to cite one example, when S.L. Bhairappa is translated from Kannada into English and other languages, it is very well received. There is a huge reception. But if the Indian writer in English is translated into vernacular languages, the reception is not as good as it is there the other way around. What are the reasons for that? Translation itself is a huge problem that can be studied in relation to Indian writing in English. Then we have not yet evolved the poetics of fiction. For example, F.R. Leavish wrote and tried to understand the English fiction in the moral tradition, the great tradition. Like that, after Meenakshi Mukherjee, we don't have any attempt to study Indian fiction as poetics. Then we don't have a single biography of our writers, just as Patrick French's biography of V.S. Naipaul, the way the world is, like that, we don't have any authoritative biographical reconstruction of our major authors, major fiction writers and their making. This is one possibility. And also we have not studied the reading public of Indian writing in English. Apart from MA students in Indian universities, who else read Indian writing in English is an important question. And also the print we need to study the print culture, reading public, reception, production of text, the selling of the text, publication, etc. So it is important to understand Indian writing in English in relation to English studies. So I think I have. I think this within the given time, 15 minutes. I think I crossed it. I'm so sorry. But the point I'm trying to just let me summarize. The point I wanted to make was this: there is a practice of Indian writing in English. There is also the way we study it. My concern is the way we study it is important. We have to invent new ways of studying it. We have to explore new ways and reconceptualizing Indian writing in English. My proposal is we have to conceptualize Indian writing in English as a literary culture, not simply as literature. Literary culture. That's all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor N.S. Gundu, sir, for your highly informative and thought-provoking lecture. Thank you, sir. I call upon our convener, Mr. Maltesh Kadar, to introduce our resource person, Professor Arunima Sinha Madam.
Good afternoon to all. A brief introduction of our resource person, Professor Arunima Sinha Madam, Head of the Department of English, Lalita Narayana, Mithila University, Darbhanga, Bihar. She has got a wide teaching and a research experience of more than 35 years. Professor Arunima Sinha Madam is on the editorial board of many journals and has many articles to her credit. She has also written a book on Kingsley Ames. She is interested in fiction and women studies. She is on the editorial board of many journals. She is a member of the Gender Sensitization Cell and also the presiding officer of the ICC. She has the credit of organizing the first ever international conference in English in Lalita Narayana Mithila University and the first ever alumni meet in Lalita Narayana Mithila University in 2018. She firmly believes in the saying that a person must give more to society than he or she takes from it. Today, we are glad to have such an enthusiastic and great personality for our national level webinar as a resource person.
Thank you so much, Sheila. I request Professor Arun.
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
madam.
yes.
You are audible.
Thank you so much for, the introduction. I think it was by Mr. Malatesh Gadad, who is from the Department of English also, and he's the convener of this. And I'm really honored to be
Thank you,
presenting
ma'am.
my paper in this on this platform, which is Trends in Indian Writing in English. And there's a semicolon, and it is fiction. Anyway, now first of all, let me thank all of you for letting me in, and I would like to convey my greetings to Shri M.C. Doreswamy, who is the Chief Executive Officer of SJM Vidyapeeth, Shri A.J. Padma Shivaya, who is the Secretary of SJM, and Dr. G.E. Vijaya Kumar, who is the Principal and also the HOD of English, and Professor Rupa Vijay Kumar, who is the Organizing Secretary. My greetings to Professor G.V. Kori, who is the IQAC coordinator and also the HOD of Commerce, and of course, Mr. Malatesh Gadad, who is the convener. Now, my greetings to the resource persons, Dr. N.S. Gundur and Professor G.A. Ghanshyam. And I was really very impressed to hear the keynote address by Mr. Gundur. I think it is by Gundur. Anyway, and he spoke so well, and he gave an entirely different view of Indian English literature, and we should all, I think, follow that. Anyway, my topic is gender issues in Indian English fiction, because I'm a feminist and I believe in feminism, and gender issues are always very near to my heart. Now, before we talk about gender issues, we must understand that gender does not refer only to the female sex, but it refers both to male and females. And also that gender and sex are two different concepts. According to the English Encyclopedia, gender is social expectation about behavior regarded appropriate for members of each sex. Gender does not refer to the physical attributes in terms of which men and women differ, but to socially formed traits of masculinity and femininity. In short, actually, sex is a natural characteristic of human being, and gender a man-made concept. That is why Simone de Beauvoir said that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. Today, when we talk of gender, it generally refers to women and gender discrimination. This is because a dominant patriarchal structure has always controlled all forms of social consciousness and has resulted in social inequality. The result is that gender issue pertaining to the oppression of the female sex has also become a dominant theme in literary works written by women all over the world. Now, some of the men have also written, but it is mostly the women who have written about this oppression. Anyway, if we go through the fiction of any country, the position of women through the centuries can easily be understood. Women were utilized and they were depicted as charming and fascinating creatures, but equal rights were denied to them. Shakespeare drew his heroines with love, and some of his female characters are remembered even now. But we all know that what was the position of women in his days. Women were not allowed to act, and female roles were played by young boys. With the changing time, the role of women has changed all over the world, and India too is not an exception. Though women have achieved many heights and have conquered hitherto unconquered male bastions, but we still have a vast terrain to cover. Now, Alice Munro once remarked that women are great storytellers. India too can boast of a vast number of women fiction writers dealing with the position of women in modern India. Indeed, the corpus of women writers in English in India outnumbers those of men. In our country, in fact, the whole subcontinent is very different from the West. The Indian society, with its firm roots in culture and religion, has been a witness to social imbalance on a large scale. In the early Vedic era, women were given equal importance as men. They were considered to be incarnations of beauty and intellect. We have some famous women writers like Gargi, Maitri, Lopamudra, who were great scholars and engaged in fruitful intellectual discussions. However, in the post-Vedic era, women began to be considered a liability, a burden in Indian families. Though religion made them Shakti Swarupa and placed them on a podium, the difference between men and women could be actually traced back to the ancient Hindu civilization. The gender issues became evident in epics and myths. For example, Sita in Ramayana became the ideal image of a woman, submissive, quiet, loyal, and pure. They became objects of sacrifice. I would like to share a small story here. In the Ramayana, we have the story of Dashrath, who had a beautiful daughter and yearned for sons. When he approached a great sage to perform a yagna to bless him with sons, he had to give away his only daughter to the great sage. Thus, his only daughter had to leave the comfort of a home and lead a life of austerity in her husband's ashram so that her father could have sons. The role of an ideal woman, wife, and daughter became deeply rooted in cultural tradition and soon became the established norm. Gender discrimination became the norm, and women were viewed as the other sex. The concept of patriarchy thus was ingrained firmly in the Indian psyche, and no amount of modernity actually could uproot it. The women were indeed in a very challenging social position. Indian fiction, English fiction, began in the 19th century with the publication of Bankim Chandra Chatterjee's novel, Rajmohan's Wife. As all of us know, that it was the phase of imitation and gender issues were rarely discussed. Tagore, the great writer from Bengal, with his innate humanity, did depict accurate and sympathetic picture of female characters. Very limited number of women had access to education and only a handful knew the English language. Majority of the women were trapped in a subservient belief system. Some women writers who started writing in the last quarter of the 19th century did depict a new awareness but in a very, very hesitant manner, trying to avoid any friction with the traditionalists. They tried to balance the newly acquired Western thoughts with the existing social conditions. They tried to tell the world of the obstacles the Indian woman faced and the disadvantages they suffered in an orthodox setup. Their contribution to English fiction is very important because they could communicate the experiences as women. Therefore, most of these early writing is in autobiographical form. Toru Dutt, Sarojini Naidu, Krupabai Satyanathan, Cornelia Surabji, Swarn Kumari, Rukaiya Shakhawat Hussain, Shivanthi Bal Nikambe, Ratnabai are some of the early writers who wrote in English. Gender concerns and a new awareness about women in India took place at the same time as it did in the West. However, the needs of women in different countries are dissimilar, conditioned by several factors: familial, cultural, religious, and societal. Now, India, with its diversity, its deep cultural and traditional norms, the Parda system, it was a very complex ground for feminism to thrive. Also, unlike the West, gender concerns in India were first initiated by men, not women. India became a free country in 1947, but consciousness about the rights of women had already taken roots around 1850 when social reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy strove to actually abolish the sati pratha. We all are aware with the fierce opposition and contempt of the people who supported orthodoxy that these reformers faced. From 1915 onwards, a new era began, and this was an era when Indians engaged in the fight for independence struggle. Women also played a vital part in the struggle for freedom and were influenced by the thoughts of Gandhi and Ambedkar. They were not unaware of the growth of women movements in the West, as now more and more women were educated and stepped out of the confines of their homes to partake in public life. If we look at the fiction written in the pre-independence period, we will see that gender concerns were present in the writings of male writers too, like R.K. Narayan. I'm giving only one example. Now, if you look at his novel, The Dark Room, published in 1938, it shows that his heroine is a rebel who breaks out of oppression from her unfaithful husband and tries to commit suicide. But she is saved by a village blacksmith and she seeks a job as a caretaker of a temple. But she prefers to go back to her previous dark room as she is unable to cope with life without her children and dependence on men. In the post-independent period, also called the post-colonial period, especially after 1960, saw the emergence of a group of modern writers, mostly women, who had a distinct sense of identity. Now, these writers were not conventional or influenced by myths or epics. Their acute understanding of the male domination made them able to write about women's experiences in a contemporary context. These early post-colonial writers focused on issues like economic hardships, the clash between rural and middle class society, and captured the suffering of the downtrodden women. These issues can be found in the novels of Kamla Markande, Nayantara Shehgal, and Ruth Prabar Jhabwala. They offered a valuable insight into the reality of Indian women at that time. And most of these women writers have women as the central characters, and through them, they present the dilemmas that are present in modern Indian traditional society. With rapid globalization and the development on the economic, cultural, and political fronts, many changes occurred in the social structure. There was now an increasing intercultural exchange and questions about gender roles and redefining the social position of women. Women writers now began to explore to break away from the traditional social limits, and hence new themes emerged in Indian fiction. One of the central themes was the clash between traditional and moral values, which led to an identity crisis in the life of the protagonist. In order to solve these personal conflicts, they go on a journey of self discovery. Personal growth became important, and therefore, the main characters had to sometimes abandon their roles within their families and break old patterns of behavior. Now, there are many writers, but I would like to quote, I would like to give the example of Anita Nayar's Ladies Coupe, who's also from Karnataka. This quest for identity is most notable in Anita Nayar's Ladies Coupe. Akhila, the middle class spinster, who is the protagonist also, leaves for a journey to Rameshwaram, leaving behind her role as a daughter, sister, and breadwinner of the family on a journey of self discovery. But we have just the opposite also. On the other hand, just the opposite type of novel, you can say. I'm giving an example of Rama Mehta's 1977 novel, Inside the Haveli. Now, the heroine has the lowest degree of female mobility. She cannot go on a journey of self discovery. The heroine is a modern girl who is married into an orthodox family of Rajasthan. She has to follow the Parda system and succumb to tradition. Now, Anita Desai in her novel expressed the recurring theme of agony of existence in a male dominated and conservative society. The complexities of man woman relationship and the internal working of a woman's mind lend a peculiar beauty to her writings. In her 1982 novel, Where Shall We Go This Summer, the protagonist is depicted as a middle aged pregnant mother who leaves her two children and husband to move to the island where she spent her childhood. She does this to put together the broken fragments of her identity. Shashi Deshpande is another writer who has given voice to gender issues. In her novel, The Dark Holds No Terrors, she has given a soul wrenching portrayal of the heroine trying to find her identity. Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things, 1997, shows how representations of patriarchy and dominance are encountered by women. Manju Kapoor is another writer from Delhi University. I think she's a professor in Delhi University, who has created non-conforming heroines in Difficult Daughters in 1988 and A Married Woman in 2003. There are a host of other writers who defines the Indian women of today, her insecurities and struggles in accordance with the cultural, social, historical, and religious atmosphere of our society. The voices of the Indian diaspora, Jhumpa Lahiri, Chitra Divakaruni, Kiran Desai, Bharti Mukherjee, have all contributed in of immigrants who face their own peculiar type of problems concerning national identity and gender identity. Now, here I would actually try to, like to talk on writers from the Northeast. Now, we have an interesting number of poets who have written in their regional language and also English in the Northeast. Now, it is true that writing in English from Northeast India is a relatively new literature. It began in the 80s and 90s of the 20th century, which is quite late in comparison to other parts of India. The Northeast comprises of 8 states of the region, and all the states differ from each other in terms of culture, tradition, language, and religion. It is also interesting to note that I have read many articles in which people have said that the general impression is that the women of the Northeast are more free, more dynamic, more free, and than the women in the other parts of the country. But the fact is that they also face strong discriminatory practices, and they still and these practices still actually exist against women, especially in the tribal areas, and they too have to suffer in their own cultural context. Now, Urvashi Butalia, I think everybody has heard of her, is a feminist and social activist, and she has the honor of founding two feminist publication houses, Kali. Great. Am I taking too much of time? Am I exceeding, am I exceeding my limit? Hello?
Madam, am I audible to you, madam?
Yes,
Sinha, madam?
yes,
You can
yes,
conclude in 5 minutes, madam.
yes.
You can conclude, madam, in 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll conclude in 5 minutes. Okay, okay, 5 minutes. I would now. I have already said that it is about Vicky Hamdar. She's another woman writer from Northeast Bengal, and she's a house servant. She actually educated herself and she wrote an autobiography, which was translated. And then about the Dalit writers, I have just read Baba's Sangati, which was published in 1994. And there are so many other Dalit writers. Now, these Dalit writers are actually, they face oppression on first because of their caste or for their untouchable status, and secondly because of their what do you call that, women. Now, so in during the day they face oppression from the society because of their caste, and at night they face oppression from their husbands. Anyway, now I won't go much onto the Dalit writers because the time is limited, but I would have loved to I would have loved to actually throw some light on the Dalit writers. Now, you have now another thing which I think would be incomplete is LGBT fiction, which also comes under the purview of gender issues. Now, LGBT fiction, Manju Kapoor's A Married Woman, Baby G by Asha Daveshwar, Loving Women Being Lesbian in Unprivileged India by Maya Sharma, Me Hijra, Me Lakshmi by transgender activist Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi are four well-known books in this genre. It is true that gender issues are more of the concern of women writers than the men. M.R. Anand and Bhavani Bhattacharya have shown their concern about the situation of women, but it is the women writers who are more concerned. In the beginning, the expression and articulation by women had been timid and reserved. She more or less exhibited an apologist's attitude, almost always compromising under patriarchal mindsets. But recent fiction has shown a definite change. Women writers are no longer apologetic. They are bold enough to air their most private and innermost feelings. Like we have the example of Kamla Das and her autobiography, My Story, in which she reveals her desires as a woman and her extramarital affairs. They are now confident in their strides, and it is interesting to note that most of them dislike being called feminist. Most of these writers have won international acclaim, and we are already 2 decades into the 21st century, and I will leave it to the listeners to assess whether things have improved for the women or not. The government has taken many significant steps to ensure the well-being of women. Let us look forward to a brighter tomorrow. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hello, ma'am.
Thank you very much, madam. Thank you very much, madam, for your insightful lecture on gender issues in Indian fiction in English. Thanks a lot, madam.
Thank you.
Now I request our IQAC coordinator and head of the Department of Commerce, Professor G.V. Kori, sir, to introduce our resource person, an erudite scholar.
Hello, dignified dignitaries and dear delegates. I myself is Professor G.V. Kori, IQAC Coordinator, STM Women's College, Ranebendur. It gives me an immense pleasure to introduce third session resource person Dr. G.A. Ganasham. His initials and name themselves defines his personality. It means his initials G and A. G means great, A means active, Gana in Kannada means strong. So he is a great and active and a strong academician. Basically, he is a professor of English. Presently, he is in charge officer on special duty at the Directorate of Higher Education, Chhattisgarh. Geographically, he is far away, but hotly he is so close to us. Throughout his student career, he was not only meritorious but also enthusiastic. He secured PhD degree from Guru Ghasidas University, Bilaspur. For his thesis, The Novels of Arun Joshi, a thematic study with his 24 years of teaching service in different government colleges. He also worked in different capacities such as Deputy Registrar, Assistant Controller of Examination, NSS and NCC officer. He authored 5 books, published 14 works and 95 articles. He has presented
say Kalidas is the Shakespeare of India? Why can't we say Shakespeare is the Kalidas of the Western world? So we have to look from that particular angle. India has dominated the globe for years together as far as literature is concerned. And Indian literature is really strong. It doesn't matter. After the Britishers entered India, we started writing in English. But yes, English has come out like a flutter of the butterfly. And we started using English as a flutter of the butterfly. And then this particular English, we started with the flutter of the butterfly, converted into a huge hurricane. And with the help of the hurricane, we said to the Britishers, go back to your country. Yes, we have dominated English. We have not only dominated English, but we started using English in our own way. And that's why these writers, they emerged. The big three, like Raja Rao, R.K. Narayan, Mulk Raj Anand, they started writing in their own way. Mulk Raj Anand started writing with the help of Hindustani English. Many of the words have been coined by Mulk Raj Anand. When I visited Dhvanya Loka and I was just talking to Dr. C.D. Narasimhaya, where I met Mulk Raj Anand, Kamla Das and R.K. Narayan also, and Dr. C.D. was telling, Indian English has emerged like a kind of an entity which cannot be replaced. Yes, it cannot be replaced. We are finding words for our own literature in English. Why can't the English people find a word for our own words? So that should be the approach. And that's why the mend of the minds is very necessary with the help of the trends which we are using. So the trends which are very common in our Indian literature is nationalism, where Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Shri Aurobindo and Sarojini Naidu have used it to the maximum. Then comes another trend, individual and society, wherein Raja Rao, Mulk Raj Anand, Arun Joshi and Salman Rushdie and many others, they came into existence with the help of these particular trends like individual and society. Then all of a sudden, this women empowerment came. Women were empowered in the beginning. Women are empowered even today, and women are empowered even in the future also. Like in Hindi, we say, स्त्री पहले भी भारी थी, आज भी भारी है, कल भी भारी रहेगी. पुरुष पहले भी स्त्री का आभारी था, आज भी आभारी है और आगे भी आभारी रहेगा. So, women are empowered. And Bharti Mukherjee, Manju Kapoor, Shobha De, Shashi Deshpande, Anita Desai, Kiran Desai, and Sudha Murthy, all of them, they came and they started talking about the women empowerment. They're talking about bringing her from the four walls to the forefront. Then came another trend, urbanization. Manohar Malgaonkar, Khushwant Singh, Amitabh Ghosh, Vikas Swarup, all of them, they started writing about urbanization, rural to the urban. Like the rural society, which we have seen in R.K. Narayan's, the urbanization started up. And then East and West encounter. R.K. Narayan, Rutprao Jhabwala, Jhumpa Lahari, Bharti Mukherjee, Anita Desai, they talked about East-West encounter. And then all of a sudden, Indianness came. R.K. Narayan, Salman Rushdie, V.S. Naipaul, Shashi Tharoor, all these people, they started talking about Indianness. And then liberty started coming. Raja Rao, Rabindranath Tagore, then the voice of marginalized people, the marginalized psyche, bringing them from the margin to the center. And somebody said, there was no margin in the beginning, there was no center in the beginning. And at the end also, there will be no margin, there will be no center. So what to talk about margin, what to talk about the center? The people whom we call marginalized, they call themselves, they are in the mainstream. And they talk about us as marginalized because we do not belong to their society. And we tell them that you don't belong to our society, so that's why you are marginalized. Who is marginalized? Where is the margin? So that's the basic issue which has to be practiced. And then family relationships. Kamla Markandeya, Anita Desai, Shashi Deshpande, Ritpravar Jhabwala, Manju Kapoor, all of them, they talked about the family. This COVID-19 has given a new insight to family relationships. We are bonding together. We are talking to the people whom we haven't spoken for years together during COVID-19. It has brought families together to gather many more things of our life. Then myth and mythology, Raja Rao, R.K. Narayan, Arundhati Rai, Rudyard Kipling, all these people, they talked about myth and mythology. Then came love, sex, and marriage. Most of the modern writers are using this. And all these trends are being used in Indian literature. When they write it in English, they call it Indian writings in English. But I always call it Indian literature. If I am writing in English, if I am writing in Kannada, if I am writing in Hindi, whatever it may be, English has become the language of India. It's not the foreign language, because it becomes the language of a person who uses it. So in the same way, the modern Indian English authors, they started focusing on the contemporary issue, the social issues, the gay relationships have come up, marital affairs, family issues, cultural conflict, alienation, social problem. Like Arun Joshi came with alienation. And Kiran Desai, then Anita Desai, all of them, they started writing about alienation. And all of a sudden, there was a person who came with a huge, what you call it as a hurricane, Salman Rushdie. His style was his style not only dominated the entire canvas of the Indian literature, but it has dominated the world literature also. And with his Pidgin English, he signaled a fresh style in writing, and which has given influence to the multicultural influences and concerns. So many of the authors, those who came after Salman Rushdie, they started using the style of Salman Rushdie. So Salman Rushdie has become the trendsetter for Indian literature. And these are the trendsetters. The Salman Rushdie, Rohinton Mistry, V.S. Naipaul, Amitabh Ghosh, Jhumpa Lahiri, Upamenyu Chatterjee, Vikram Seth, Bapsi Sidhwa being a Pakistani, Shashi Tharoor, Shobha De, Chetan Bhagat, Chitra Banerjee, Sudha Murthy. If you compare Sudha Murthy, when an interview was going on with Shashi Tharoor, Sudha Murthy said, Shashi, you write for the learned few. I write for the common man. I write for the common people. I want English to be understood by a common man. Like T.S. Eliot has said, I write my poems for the learned few. If you see the English of Shashi Tharoor, the ornamental English, the kind of an English which he uses, and the English which you see in Sudha Murthy are in Chetan Bhagat. Chetan Bhagat is being read by all the people, even all the engineering graduates and management graduates, they have a book of Chetan Bhagat. So if these books are in the pockets or in the library or in the hands of the students, then certainly these trends are mending the minds of our learners. So that's the basic essence of literature. That's the basic function of literature, and that's the basic function of Indian literature. And translation has come into action. It's not translation, but it has become a transcreation. The writer is writing in his own way. He is blending the things. Means he is blending the target language with the origin language. So the original language is being blended with the target language. So if you don't blend, then it will come to an end. So the very essence of education is to blend, and then you lend. And if you cannot blend and lend, you will end the process of learning. So we must not end the process of learning. So the trendsetter is a person who creates and elevates and dominates a kind of a new trend which others will follow. So that's why in Indian literature, the feminist-centered approach which has come into existence in the modern trends, man-woman relationship has come into existence, the psyche of the human state and the quality of life. People started writing about the quality of life, the human state. They started writing about the college and corporate setting, like Chetan Bhagat. He started writing about all these things because that attracted the young minds. And someone has said long back, and even some of my friends said, Indian literature or Indian writings in English is not so eloquent or not so appealing like the British literature or the American literature. I always feel Indian literature has not only attracted people from the West, but it has made them to come and surrender themselves to our literature. So we must always feel proud of it. Our literature has a vast canvas. Nowhere in the world you will find such a multilingual culture of literature in the globe. So that's why the grassroots details of the sociological, cultural, economical, and political history of India was once again the theme of many of the novels. then the subaltern consciousness, subaltern. So why to call them subaltern once again? Another question. So there are various questions which are coming up in the arena of literature and which we have to answer. The technique of hybrid language using magic realism and with the native themes, the hybrid culture is emerging. Yes, because of the combination of so many cultures coming together, Indian literature has come out like a hybrid culture. The diasporic identity, the diaspora has come into existence and which reflects the history, society, political domain, economic status, and the tradition of Indian subcontinent. And when someone asked Kamla Das, why do you write in English? She said, whatever comes to my mind, if it is coming in English, then I'm writing in English. Why should I write in my own mother tongue? Why can't I write in English? So everyone who is using English, everyone who is using the language has the, if he has the or she has the ability to write, so they must use the language. Language is not a barrier, but language becomes the carrier for our career. So if we use these languages together as a carrier for culture, carrier for values, carrier of all the things, then the trend will definitely change. The authors of this form of writing represents not only the panorama of India as they churn out various hidden issues under the surface of Indian culture and tradition. This form of writing got admiration both in home and abroad and heralding a new awareness in the domain of world literature. So when we talk of world literature, we cannot eliminate Indian literature because Indian literature plays a very dominant and vital role in the world literature. And that's why Max Muller, who came from Germany, studied Vedas in India, has written What Can India Teach Us, in which he writes, if you encounter any kind of a problem anywhere in the world, you have the solution only and only and only in India. So India is the only country which has solution for all the problems, even the cultural issues, even the literary issues. Everywhere we will find Indianness is there. So that's why India started dominating the literature of the world. And when we talk of this, we always talk of the metamorphosis of a larva into a butterfly. This Indian literature, maybe we are writing in English, it may be in the form of a larva, but certainly it's going to become a butterfly. What I said earlier, the flutter of the butterfly is converted into a huge hurricane. So in this era, what we have to do, if we are speaking 2 or 3 languages, then we must come forward and translate it into English. Let the people understand the culture of various other languages, and if we translate them into English or transcreate them into English, they'll come to know the real essence of those language. And all the time, when we talk of Indian literature, it's basically, it has so many new trends which have come up, like the urbanization, the rural element, and even ma'am was talking about the Dalit literature. Dalit, they are a part of the society. They have their own culture. So when we talk of all these cultures together, why to categorize literature into various pockets? Why can't we call them a complete whole literature? So when we call of a whole, then there is no category at all. We all are born human beings, but now we have to learn how to be being human. So being human is the essence which is needed in literature also. And in that way, if we bring out our culture, our literature, the Indianness of our own culture in English, I do believe this larva will certainly convert into a butterfly. And that's what we always want, that Indian literature must not only progress, must not only dominate, but at the same time must reveal various other facts which are hidden. If you talk of Kalidasa, if you talk of any of the authors, maybe it Kuvempu, maybe Dara Bendre, maybe Shivram Karant, or whatever name you take of Indian literature, all of them have immense potential which has not seen the light of the day. And in the same way, we have to practice all these things. The basic elements of literature are to be brought forward for the researchers to work on. and the keynote speaker was really profound thoughts were there when he said we have to practice them, we have to use them, we have to make them as the part and parcel of our life. Then only the Indian literature will emerge as the beautiful butterfly flying high in the sky of world literature. So thank you very much. You have provided me a wonderful platform to interact with you all and given me a chance to put forth my ideas. I really appreciate your way of doing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor J. Gansham sir, for your highly informative lecture with a wonderful title, Blend the Trend to Mend the Minds. Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you very much. Now it is open for interaction. The participants can ask clarifications from our resource persons. If the participants have any questions, they can ask our resource persons.
Hello.
Hello. Please unmute your mic and then ask the question. Dear participants, do you have any questions?
Hello? Hello, Namaste sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, madam.
Namaste. I am Preeti Bhandarkar, Principal, Kamala Baliga College of Education, Kumta. Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
ma'am.
You are audible, madam. You are asking.
Sir,
You are
my
asking
opinion
question
is
to
that
whom?
who has base of mother tongue, he can easily get that English language. English is a universal language. I agree with you, but I felt very, very happy, sir. First of all, you presented in Kannada and that the importance of Kannada language you have presented. Thank you, sir. It's very, very necessary actually. In NEP 2020 also concerned with that and supported that mother tongue education for 5 years. It's very necessary, sir. I felt very, very happy you have presented that about that. In the beginning only. Thank you, sir. It's a very nice presentation, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
No question, no question, but I felt very, very happy to listen to your presentation, sir. That's why I.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hello. Respected Ghanshyam sir.
Any other
Yes.
questions from other
Yes, yes.
participants?
Sir. I am Dr. Pramod
Please
Shukla from
ask your
Bharat
questions.
Chhattisgarh.
Right, right, Pramod. I can listen.
Sir, I want to know about your sir opinion on what happens in schools. Literature does not give preferences in syllabi curriculum for students in school level, है ना sir?
Yes.
As you said, we should have to think just opposite what is Indian context. Like Shakespeare, we should not say ki Kalidas and Shakespeare. Shakespeare works like Kalidas, not Kalidas is Shakespeare of India. Instead of this, you said Shakespeare is Kalidas of Britain. That
Right.
is, I salute your opinion. But my query is that, sir, कि in school syllabus, do you think literature should be included in school syllabus, sir?
Yes, of course, literature has to be a part and parcel of our lives, right? We cannot go out of literature. Literature is always there, like the blood flows in the same way the literature has to flow within. If the school curriculum doesn't have literature, then the school curriculum is lacking something which is really the soul of education. The entire soul of education is literature, right? Language is just a means of communication, but literature is basically the life. Literature is the light. Literature is the essence of our lives. So if literature is not there, then you cannot think of human being converting into being human,
जी
right?
Any more questions from the participants?
थैंक यू सर थैंक यू वेरी मच
Oh, most welcome, Pramod. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir, and dear participants for your active participation in the interaction.
Ma'am,
Any more questions? Shall we conclude?
ma'am, if you allow me, there is a question by Indrani MR,
Okay.
who she has written today, speaking about Shakespeare is considered outdated. How would you put it across, sir? So nothing is outdated, right? We come and go, but the people, they remain there only. There are various other ways to find these people. Shakespeare was not outdated, is not outdated, will never be outdated. People keep on quoting Shakespeare, people will keep on quoting Kalidasa, people will keep on quoting Kuvempu, people will keep on quoting Dara Bendre, people will keep on quoting Shivram Karant. All these people, they are never outdated. They came to this world on a particular date. They went away from this world on a particular date, but they remained ever on in this earth, and also they remain ever in our hearts. So they will never be outdated. Why to call them outdated? We have to look them with a different angle. The angle and the approach has to be changed, and then they will never be outdated.
Hello.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
It was
Hello.
really well answered. But the thing is, today's generation,
Hello. I added.
many. So can I
Yes, ma'am.
ask?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, ma'am.
I'm
Yes.
very happy and convinced with
Hello,
what the answer
Ganesham
is
sir.
given.
Yes,
Though
ma'am.
we actually consider this, but the syllabus
Ganesham
what
sir.
actually has been prescribed in University of Mysore, where even along with we people who read, Shakespeare is still alive. But the thing is, like, why is it that many English professors put it across telling that Shakespeare should be removed because, every time reading the same thing is not a part of this English literature, literary part. So that was the question which I asked, sir. So
Right,
please
ma'am.
don't mind.
Yeah, no. I'll tell you. Shakespeare should not be removed, but Shakespeare should be removed. He should not be removed, but he should be removed, right? And the second thing is, I think Shakespeare is alive. No, we don't want Shakespeare to be alive. We want Shakespeare to be live, because we are not inculcating and involving students in that. We are somewhere we are lacking it, and that's why we are saying it outdated. He is not outdated, and no one is outdated. Our approach, and that's why I said he is not alive, but we have to make him live longer.
Sir.
Yeah, that is true, sir.
Hello.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. It was a wonderful session, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Hello,
you.
sir.
Thank you,
Ganesham
madam.
Yes,
sir.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes, sir. With your regard, whatever you said regarding Shakespeare, yes, is really nice. He should not be removed. He should be moved, replaced somewhere, and he should be made alive. And in this regard, I remembered Ben Jonson's Shakespeare is of not one age, but of all ages.
Ages. Absolutely
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And yes, it is not, you cannot say knowledge is becomes outdated, and the knowledge that we have in Shakespeare cannot be outdated. And yesterday only I attended one seminar on Shakespeare. Rajendra Chenni spoke on Tempest in the modern 21st century critical theoretical perspective. So if madam has listened to that, she wouldn't have said that Shakespeare is outdated. He cannot be outdated. He will be there forever for all the ages. And I'm really
moreover,
happy.
ma'am, whatever means, I tell to my students, if you have fear
Yeah.
of English, shake your fear with Shakespeare.
Yes, yes, sir. Really, sir. Really, very well said, sir. Very well.
Shake your fear
And
with Shakespeare.
Yes, sir. And as you said, Indian literature, wealth is there. If we compare it to Western literature, we have a lot of wealth in our Indian literature. Only thing is language problem. We cannot know other language, and because of that, I think it has been sidelined. But when I was reading that Tarabai Shinde, a Marathi writer, she has written a book called Stri Purush Tulana.
Mm-hmm.
And if
That
we
is
go through it, whatever we read in Kate Millett's Sexual Politics, more than that is there in that Tarabai Shinde. She too has compared three writers' representation of women as she too speaks in that book. I think we have to explore our Indian literature and say that India has got everything. There is no need to, as you said, Kalidas cannot be Shakespeare of what you said.
right,
We
ma'am.
have more writers, sir. So that we have to explore these writers.
You are absolutely right, ma'am.
Yes,
We
sir.
have the
Yes,
floor to
sir.
explore.
Yeah, sir. And that should be done in this regard,
Yes.
sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very
Thank you
much,
very
sir.
Thanks a lot,
Okay.
ma'am.
Yes,
Thank you.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you all for the interaction. Now we have come to the last part of the webinar, vote of thanks. First and foremost, I profusely and humbly express my pranams to our Reverend President, Dr. Sri Shivamurthy Murugash Rilaru. I express my heartfelt thanks to Honorable Secretary Sri A.J. Paramashivaya Sir and Honorable CEO Sri M.G. Doraiswamy for their continuous support. I thank Professor M.S. Gundur for the keynote address. Thank you, sir. I also express my sincere thanks to Professor Arunima Sinha Madam for sharing her valuable thoughts. Thank you, Madam. I express my heartfelt thanks to our resource person, Professor G.A. Ghanshyam Sir, for being with us and share his precious ideas. Thank you very much, sir. I thank all the participants for their active participation. I thank our principal, Dr. G. Vijay Kumar Sir, for his kind cooperation. I thank our IQAC coordinator, Professor G.V. Kori Sir. I thank all my colleagues, non-teaching staff, and my dear students. I thank our technical assistant, Mr. Varun Irupannagar. Thank you, Mr. Varun, again. I thank one and all who made this national level webinar successful. Thank you. Thank you all.